good few months back, I wrote a video called, or did a VON special called The Archon Infected Truther. And I spoke about how the actual people in the truth movement, if you look at the output of what they produce, probably between 30 and 40% of it is attacks on other people in that movement. It's a classic witch hunt mentality. They're looking for shills, they're looking for CONTELPRO agents, they're looking for psychopaths, they're looking for everything that Satanists or paedophile protectors and all this stuff, and they're all looking for these things while claiming to be truthers. They're not actually looking for the truth. They're looking for things they can actually attack that can be taken down. So, for instance, if enough of them attacked me, it would be the end of me. But if all of them banded together and attacked, say, well, it could be the enemy. If attack, say, what's his name, a Rothschild or a Henry Kissinger or Prince Philip, they know it has no effect. So it's a small town in the digital world mentality. It's that kind of idea. And when I said that they were Archon infected, I meant that very, very literally. I didn't mean that as a metaphor. And I'm going to explain to you in this video why the so-called truthers brought a demon called the Archon into manifestation. Now, this is not to disparage the work of John Lamb Lash in his book. Just about all of us has read it, not in his image. Okay. Now, John Lamb Lash deserves a lot of credit for writing this book, because it introduced a lot of people to subjects such as Gnosticism, such as interesting texts such as the Gospel of St. Thomas, the Nag Hammadi text, but more importantly, it opened up people's minds to the diabolical wickedness of the Catholic Church. Its first persecution were the Gnostics. I've never met John Lamb Lash. I did a few shows with him years ago, found him quite an interesting man. But having read this book and read the Gospel of St. Thomas and a few others on the Nag Hammadi scripts, on the seals, on the actual documents, I don't agree with him with the Archons at all. Not in the least. Now, I don't think that the Gnostics meant by Archons that they actually meant demons or demonic people. I think they meant more like powerful witches. Now, when somebody points to a witch, say you're in Germany in the 1600s or New England in the 18th century, and you point at people and call them witches, you're not calling them demons, you're not calling them devils, you're calling them emissaries of these forces. But you still know that they're mortal beings. And I think that's what the Gnostics meant by the term Archon. They meant that they were literally the leaders, which is what the word translates to from the Greek. Archon simply means leaders. I think they were talking about the bureaucrats. I think they were talking about the civil servants, the magistrates. I think that's why so many freeman type truthers this idea appealed to them. They were talking about these kinds of ideas, the power structure, the psychopathic control grid of Egypt and Greece when the Gnostics were there at that early time in Christianity, with the first 100, 200 years of Christianity. We all know they were ruthlessly persecuted, and that's one of the good things about that book. It makes people rightly angry at the Catholic Church. And they were more or less wiped off the face of the earth until some of their teachings kind of distillated into groups like the Bogomils of the Slavic region, and then eventually into the Cathars of southern France and northern Spain. And then we don't know what happened there, a massive genocide against them. So it just saw power in those thinkings, in those kinds of ideas. Now, I don't believe the Archons in any way are or were, well, they are now, but they weren't then, a demonic force, we call it. Now, in demonology and in these ideas of demons, let me tell you for a fact that demons absolutely do exist. But they're not what popular culture tells you they are. And a lot of that is because of Christianity, maybe in a very clandestine way, trying to cause disruption in order so they can fix it up. A demon is a vacuum or a hole in the psychic or spiritual force that's always filled by a malevolent entity. Now, when I say entity, I don't mean as an actual being, or anything like that called Astaroth or anything. They are forces. They are energetic forces. Now, the reason why you have drawings and descriptions in ancient texts, in Christian texts on demonology, is to allow people to visualize better an archetypal and also a more literal way of what they're up against. So if you're fighting against something, it's easier to understand that in terms of an image, or even if you're worshipping something, an image, than it is to look into your own subconscious, especially if your subconscious mind is more developed than your conscious mind. It's very difficult for a person of low education and stuff to just imagine a force beyond its visual idea, its contextual idea. So, for instance, demons or daimonic reflectors can appear in all kinds of ways. A classic example of it, you could call Picasso's painting Guernica a demon, because it was a gap left in Picasso's psyche by that event of the bombing of that city that stayed with him and ended up inside him, and he produced himself a demon or a daemon in the form of this huge painting. He filled the hole in his psyche or his spiritual force by that. That's why art is a very important way of understanding how people are inside, because a lot of paintings are acts of witchcraft in a way. Well, they are all magic. They are, in the end, they don't mean they're bad or dangerous or anything. They just are what they are. Now, another aspect of demons being created would be UFOs. Carl Jung correctly identified that UFOs were demons created by the fears of the atomic age coming after the bombs were dropped in Japan, but especially in the USA after the news came out that the Soviets had successfully forcibly detonated an atomic bomb, and then secondly a hydrogen bomb. And that would these UFOs and lights in the sky were the demons of their time. It's just that we lived in an age where they could science fictionalize them rather than draw them as devils or anything like that. They drew them as spaceships rather than devils. And these psychic things happen, these demonic creations, these demonic reflections or daimonic reflections happen when you have these voids or these areas of terror. Like, for instance, I would say the social justice warriors in America, a lot of them are having visions of demons and UFOs, and they're not telling anyone about it because they all think you're atheists, or they're having supernatural events like poltergeists in their apartments, because they cannot adjust to the changes that are happening in the reality. In the same way, you had these witch persecutions during the Reformation. You had people literally going into frenzy and saying they were controlled by Adonai or Astaroth or Beelzebub. And so it made it easier for people back in those days to say, imagine Beelzebub as the Lord of the Flies. So when they would see a pestilence, when they would go into these furies or see pestilence of flies, which wouldn't have been unusual back then, as there would have been bodies all over the place being hanged, shot, murdered, killed, or burnt, you would have had flies everywhere. So we're into the world of a kind of an interesting psychology here. The flies represent the decaying corpses of the people who killed them, so they were self-created, self-reflective, daimonic aspects of the culture at the time. I know a lot of truthers, most of you aren't intelligent enough to understand that, because that's why you're truthers. You tend to be of very low intelligence. That's why you need science fiction ideas like reptilians and so on to create your own images, because you can't accept that these people that run the world that just are what they are. You have to kind of diamonically have them pictorialized for you. And yes, of course, we have that. The reptilians idea was the first one, but it didn't really. It initially got people in the door, but ultimately it's rooted in science fiction. But so is Archon. The term Archon is a very friendly sounding word if you just kind of inclined individual. It sounds like the Cylons from Battlestar Galactica. It has that vibe to it. It's an attractive word. The syllabalization is easy to rolls in off your tongue. It's an archon. She's an archon. And what the reality is, the ones of the people who are saying this are archons themselves. Now, how did this happen? Well, there you had the truth movement developing, and you had people going through this stage of like, we're going to take down the elites, we're going to blame them for 9/11 or whatever they wanted to think they were going to do. And what happened then was, very interestingly, they started turning on each other. And I noticed as soon as it started, that Mr. Lam Lash became very popular with them, they found a new term to use, the archon. Now you had the big truth gurus who have big, huge, massive audiences using this term archon and dovetailing it into their previous work. What they were basically doing was they were bringing this demon into manifestation. This was the void within the truthers not getting their satisfaction, the great world not appearing, the great awakening not happening, and so the frustration builds up. The free men were all arrested or they failed in court. It builds up, and suddenly they have the archons. And the fact that it has a Christian aspect to it is ideal, because most truthers would come from a Christian background, therefore of low intelligence, low education, inability, don't even understand, they've never even read or understand their own Bible, let alone any other esoteric text. Now when you have these truth gurus on the stage talking about archons this, archons that, what you've done is you've named the demon, something you should never do. The archons only existed as the bureaucrats of ancient Egyptian society under Greek or Roman rule. They did not become a demonic force. Anything can be made a demonic force, a demonic reflection. Well, they started to name them. You be very careful about what you name. Start naming things like this. You have very, very fucking careful. And so they started naming them. Everything was an archon, 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 archon. And what you have is these things are brought into manifestation. Now, when the gap that had been created within the truthers and within the truth movement as a whole, an actual energetic force, a demonic force known as an archon, appeared within inside it. Now, every demonic force is adversarial, in that it's almost like a magnet. It repels from everything else, even from other demons. There'll never be a horde of demons invading the reality, because they're like two poles, the same poles of a magnet. They fly apart. They're always adversarial, which is what makes this idea of the name of Jesus being a demon very interesting. Well, I know he's a fiction. He doesn't exist. Well, almost certainly he doesn't exist. And so by using the name, when exorcists or spiritualists call the name Jesus, they're invoking one demon to frighten away a smaller one, one larger energy force against a greater. The smaller one will run away so it's not absorbed. And so it absorbed, the idea of the archon absorbed into them. They absorbed into them. And then they started turning on each other and savaging each other because they created a demon. Here you are thinking that they were fighting against a demonic force that never existed until they created it. And when they created it, it turned on them and savaged them. They created the demon. And that's why they all... And you don't get so many now. A lot of them are either dead, suicidal in psychiatric hospitals, or they've hopefully the majority of them have realised that they were led down the garden path by all these truth gurus and truth videos. You see, the problem with these truth gurus is they're not educated, any of them. They just repeat what the other one says, and it's assumed that that's the truth. And then they all find their little thing. Like it's like becomes a marketing ploy. John Lan Lash comes out with the term archon, right? One other truth guru says, I can use this to dovetail and put foundation on my own bullshit theory. That becomes, then another one sees that, and then he starts using archon. And she starts using archon, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. I saw that happen with my work on psychopaths. It goes on and on and on. These people have done no research, no study, have no esoteric grounding. They don't even have a library. They watch 5 minutes of a YouTube video and they declare themselves experts. And then they go out there and they got their huge audience of audiences that I'll never have, of tens of thousands. My audience is mostly mainstream, but it's relatively small. But it seems big because it is mainstream, and these people have more power and so on. But the alternative audience I have, they all tend to be either educated or have a yearning to be educated. They're not happy with just the truth video that goes, oh, dun, 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 the Illuminati, Archons are coming, dun, dun, this kind of stuff. And when they make these kind of videos with the dun, 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 what happens is it brings the stuff into manifestation anymore, because they're creating a magical charge. They're bringing it into manifestation. So if the truth movement has anything that it can actually point the finger to and it achieved. Now, I'm not talking about alt media or kind of conspiracy theory, because that kind of created a different kind of thing that went off what they call alt-right or alt-media. That was a different thing. I'm talking about the truth movement, the ones who were the most hung up on the Illuminati and reptilians and all this. If they have one thing that they can actually tangibly point to and say they created, is they created a demonic force on this in this plane called the Archons. So congratulations, truthers, you actually achieved something. You added a new demon to the catalogue of demons that didn't originally exist. So that's it. You actually achieved something. You made a new demon, and it was not John Lamb Lash's fault. It was not even. It was not. It was the leaders of the truth movement who were saying archons every 5 minutes or dovetailing to the work. They have a huge responsibility for this, because a lot of people have been driven insane and mad. If you look at a lot of their audience, they're of low intelligence, but a lot of them are people who are filled with anger and rage, and they don't really know why. They're just like social justice warriors that way, and they bump from one solution to the next. Freemen on the land, archons, psychopaths, reptilians. What they don't do is they don't look at themselves, and they don't look at their own psychology and say, have I been duped? Have I been duped? And when that happens, then they're no longer truthers, and they're truly awakening, and they're on the path of enlightenment. So that's it. The Archons were a demonic force that never existed before the truth movement brought them into reality. It's true, and that's just the end of it.